So first we'll talk about what exactly is equanimity. Equanimity can be described as an even-minded mental state or dispositional tendency towards all experiences or objects, regardless of their origin or affective valence, meaning if it's pleasant, if it's unpleasant, or if it's neutral. Equanimity also possesses 5 unique dimensions, which include a neutral feeling tone different from pleasurable or painful feelings, even-mindedness in the face of success or loss, a state that can merge from certain types of absorption, and cultivating the 4 subliminal states in Buddhist psychology, which include kindness, which is metta, compassion, which is karuna, appreciative joy, which is mudita, and general equanimity, which is upekkha. Essentially, equanimity is not being influenced by how something makes you feel because you kind of are even-minded in your state. And a lot of this can be reached through long time meditation techniques, just essentially not being attached to the self, which is another important concept in Buddhist psychology and Buddhist philosophy. So, when we jump into a little bit more of the scientific stuff, we talk about affect, which we learned quite a lot about in the semester. So an affective state, in contrast, is the emotional state and subjective experience or expression of an individual's feelings, moods, or emotional state. Affect can include facial expression, body language, tone of voice, and intensity or valence, which is the positive or negative emotional states. So essentially what equanimity is encouraging is an affective state that isn't too caught up in the positive or negative, that doesn't show too much sporadicness in the moods or emotional states, and it's kind of just an even-minded state. So my paper is essentially arguing that if someone is in this state, they will have a higher order cognition. And this can be backed by the Buddhist psychology of the understanding of cognition and emotion in general. So in Buddhist psychology, there actually is no word for emotion. It's kind of just all under one thing, one entity, which is mental states. And this goes way in depth, and you can read, if you're interested, read about this in the Abhidharma, learn about the aggregates, all of these other things. But essentially, the contrast is in Western school of thought, they have a distinction between emotion and cognition, whereas in Buddhist psychology, there's no distinction. So a heightened or hindered mental state or heightened or hindered emotion will also influence and be the same as a heightened or hindered mental state or cognition. So in order to back this by science and kind of use research and use concepts in the book to prove this, I found a study on the 5 basic emotions and stress and learning. So this study was done by Ting and colleagues in 2017. And part of the study, this is in quotes, part of the study focuses on stress and its impairment to learning and motivation. The study reports that stress, a negative emotional state, can both facilitate and impair learning and memory, depending on its intensity and duration. Specifically, mild and acute stress facilitates learning and cognitive performance, while excess and chronic stress impairs learning and is detrimental to memory and performance. So what we kind of conclude here, and it goes kind of more into the neuroscience in the paper, is that chronic stress is what hinders our learning abilities. And this, if you struggle with depression or anxiety, many mental defilements can influence the way you think. If you've experienced this personally or known someone who was struggling with one of these forms of neurosis, they might be a little bit slower, a little bit less reactive, and just have a difficulty engaging with things in the outside world. So the key thing to note here in this study is the word chronic, and how this relates to equanimity is when we think about equanimity, we're thinking that yes, we can feel the stress initially, but because we have this detached state, because we don't feed into the stress, it doesn't have any valence on our lives or our emotional state. It's just stress. So we feel, okay, I'm feeling stressful in this situation. I have a new job. I'm going to a new school. Stress is present, but it's not going to influence us in a pleasant or unpleasant way. It's just going to be there. So because of this, if we cultivate this state of equanimity, the chances of us also cultivating chronic stress are very, very low. So this in turn would probably influence our cognition better. We would probably be able to think a little bit clearer when we're entering that stressful situation, instead of attaching to the stressful situation as an unpleasant thing and getting caught in that loop of stress. So another study or another theory that can also back up this argument is the theory of limbic activation. So we kind of understood and learned about this also in the course. So the limbic activation theory is basically saying that the limbic system, which is our hippocampus and amygdala, when that is activated, it may evoke a visceral sensation or emotion, usually fear or anxiety. And if not regulated, both physical and mental illnesses can result. So this is kind of the manifestation of the chronic stress. So initially, that stressful thing comes to us, like a new job, a new career, and it invokes the limbic system. And that's getting, it's firing, it's waking up, and it's staying activated. So looping back to the word chronic stress. So when that's not regulated, chronic stress and other mental illnesses like depression, anxiety can result. So in this theory, the prefrontal cortex is what plays that important role in regulating the system and bringing it back to homeostasis. And equanimity and prefrontal cortex activation and regulation also are cultivated by the Buddhist practice of meditation, which I didn't talk too much on in my paper, but I think it's important to note that the states of mind that cultivate equanimity, or the behaviors that cultivate equanimity, are also the behaviors that cultivate prefrontal cortex regulation. So essentially, if we're able to arrive at a situation without a dispositional tendency and without a grasping towards the emotion that the situation is evoking in us, we will be able to think about the situation and cognitively process the situation stronger. From the data, we can see that implementing these emotional regulation and techniques like meditation, breathing techniques, exercise, to cultivate these states in the schools and workplace would be very, very helpful and could result in higher test scores, workplace performance, and overall just leave individuals with a stronger sense of well-being. Maybe even, lessen the rate for mental illness. So basically that's my project, and if you're interested in learning more about Buddhist psychology and you're in this field, or you want to go into this field, I highly recommend it. There's so many parallels, and there's just so much wisdom in the whole entire philosophy. So thank you for listening, and I hope you guys have a beautiful rest of your holiday season, and thank you.